Hey everybody, it's Ellen, the Cat LVT, coming to you at Basepaws, and it is National Pet Week, and we are celebrating with a veterinarian and a behaviorist today. But make sure before we go ahead and start this session, I want you to check out basepaws.com, where different breeds have different needs and every cat is unique. So get to know yours with a DNA test from dental to breed and health and to the whole genome sequencing. They have it all at Basepaws. So check them out today. And thank you, Dr. Herron, for joining us with your new book, Decoding the Cat. Now, before we actually go ahead and start talking about the top behavior myths today about cats, what do you wish owners knew, cat owners specifically, before assuming any of the problem their cat has is behavioral?
I just want everybody to think about establishing that wonderful relationship with their family veterinarian, because anytime, that's what we learn. That's the best part of my job being a veterinary behaviorist, is that I can understand how the physical body interplays with the mind and how that affects behavior. And often some of the best ways to detect disease in cats is through their behavior. And so a behavior change often indicates that there's something wrong physically. And so a trip to that veterinarian as soon as you see a change, particularly if it's a sudden change, make that trip to the vet first and foremost before getting on Google to solve your behavior problems.
Awesome. Now, before we move on, I do want you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and I want you to let them know what makes your book different than the other veterinary behavior books out there.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be talking about cats, and it's one of my favorite topics, behavior myths in cats. But myself, as I mentioned before, I'm a veterinary behaviorist. That means I went to veterinary school. And then after I got my DVM, I went on to general practice and also did an internship in an animal shelter working on behavior. Then I did a 3-year residency to specialize in behavioral medicine for dogs and cats, and then finished that at the University of Pennsylvania. Literally packed up my U-Haul, drove back to the Buckeye State, and was a faculty member at Ohio State at the vet school there for a good decade. And now I've moved over into the shelter world at an organization called Gigi's. And over the past couple of years, I've been a part of just a phenomenal project called Decoding Your Cat. So if you don't know, Decoding Your Cat's actually a sequel to our first book, Decoding Your Dog. And a few things make this book special. The first part is that I'm not just the author, right? I don't get to take credit for this entire book, for either book, really. It's a conglomeration of over a dozen authors, all of whom are board certified veterinary behaviorists. So all of them have the same background as me, being veterinarians, going on to do that residency to specialize in behavioral medicine. So we have over 12 experts contributing to both of these books, not just decoding behavior problems, but decoding what lies underneath. So the whole physical body and the interplay between physical and mental well-being and health, and how you really cannot separate one from the other. And there are great authors. There are wonderful cat behavior books out there. And I get asked this question a lot. Even our publisher asks us this, well, why would we publish your book when there's so much out there on behavior? Why are you different? And I would say you really are going to struggle to find another book that really looks at the physical aspect of your pet, particularly the behavioral signs that there is a medical issue, because we really want to be proactive, particularly with cats. Often they can be very stoic, and their signs can be subtle, but the signs are there. And I think being able to really recognize them early is going to help increase the longevity and overall well-being of your cat.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you kind of going into that into detail. Now, before we go ahead and start screen sharing with you, do you ever discuss with a cat owner before you say, yes, we're going to take you on as a behavioral case? Do you always say, I need you to see your veterinarian first before actually deciding that this is a behavioral problem?
Well, ideally, we are referred by a family veterinarian. And so we are always asking to see the medical records and every test that's been done, because we want to see that ruled out ahead of time. I will say, though, as a veterinary behaviorist, I'm quite comfortable doing that medical workup myself. It just allows it to be a little more efficient if that's already been done with the family veterinarian. But I've had cats referred to me for peeing outside the litter box that have never had a urinalysis. No veterinarian had ever checked their urine. That's a little surprising when that happens to me, because I will say when I was in general practice, I saw a cat for peeing outside a litter box every single day. And maybe half of them were behavioral, most of them, if at least half were a medical reason for it. And once we resolved the medical cause, we resolved the behavioral issue of inappropriate elimination.
Awesome. Are you guys being affected with COVID just like everybody else is in America, just trying to get an appointment with their veterinarian? Do you find it even harder to kind of accommodate cats that need to be seen for behavioral visits?
Oh, sure. I think veterinary medicine is on fire right now. And just speaking from a shelter standpoint, everybody wants a pet right now. And so just the demand for pets has increased. And, thankfully, more and more families are welcoming pets into their home, which is a wonderful thing. And I hope it stays that way now that people realize the benefits and just the enrichment and enhancement to their own lives they can have by adding a pet. That this remains, but it has caused a huge demand on veterinary medicine. So you are correct. It is difficult and you have a longer wait, particularly as a new patient. So we're telling everyone who adopts from us, call your vet right now to try to get on the schedule because it may be a few weeks. For behavior, the great thing about behavior, particularly if we do have a family veterinarian we're working with, is that we can do a lot curbside or virtual. Right. And actually, for a behaviorist to be able to see inside someone's home is almost better than seeing that patient in an exam room, because we see them in their natural environment. And we have pet families who can just walk us through. Here's the litter box room. Here's where my perches are. Here's where this cat likes to hang out. Here's where this cat likes to hang out. Here's the window. Here's what the yard looks like. So it's actually even better for us sometimes to be able to do these appointments virtually. Again, clearly working with a veterinarian who's already worked up the cat for a medical problem.
That's awesome. And you guys, can you typically tell within the first few minutes of a virtual, like especially when they're panning around the room with their iPad or iPhone, you can be like, I know your problem with like in the first few minutes, I'm like, we already see what we need to correct.
I will say on occasion that does happen. I can think of one situation of a multi-cat household where the access to the litter box was through a little pet door under the stairs. So you know how a lot of times the under the stairs can be enclosed. Well, they had one little pet door, all the litter boxes in there, and it just took one cat to just sit there and just dare the other cats to enter. And we solved our problem pretty fast of why the other cats weren't using the litter box. But it's not always that easy. But that's why these cases are fun, because it's investigatory. We're having people go through every room and draw pictures and really try to uncover what the pattern is to these behaviors. And I'm very blessed to have a job that I love.
Well, there certainly is a lot to learn about behavior, and we got a lot of people that are finally joining us on our event today. So thank you everybody for joining us for National Pet Week here at Basepaws. I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Herron start sharing her screen because she's going to go over the top 10 behavioral myths for cats, and it's going to be a real treat.
Yeah, thank you, Ellen. So my plan is, if it works, I just put through a PowerPoint together. It's not very detailed. A lot of this is very off the cuff, and I would welcome, if you want to throw things into the chat, I'll do my best to sort of look at them, because I want you to use your minds too. Not just sit back and relax, but also be a little interactive. So I'll throw out my myths, and if you before I kind of reveal why they're myths and how we debunk them, you want to throw out there sort of why you think it's a myth. Why don't you think this is right? And I've spoken to all walks of audiences here, some that are cat experts and some that have never had a cat before. And I feel, regardless of the audience, some people are always surprised that some of the things we talk about today are indeed myths. But that's what makes it really fun. And that's why our book is so important, because I think people come with a lot of preconceived ideas or misconceptions about cats, cat health, and cat behavior. And Decoding Your Cat really helps not just debunk 10 myths, but really decode all of that about cat behavior and cat health. All right, so I will get started here. So our first myth, maybe, there we go. All right, so cats scratch up furniture because they are bored. Does anyone think that's true? Why do cats scratch? Is it because they're bored? Feel free to throw something in the chat if you think it's natural. Notorious Liz, yes. Just sharpen claws.
I actually have a question, and this is a valid one. What if you give your cats their own piece of furniture to scratch?
I would love it.
So that would be like one of the ultimate cat scratching post is that they had their own designated piece of furniture they could go to town on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll talk about that in a second. Why furniture is so appealing to them. Yeah, so I have Jen Fiddle saying false. They're scenting their environment, to mark and to stretch, sharpening claws, territorial response. All right. Oh my gosh, you guys are clearly a great audience here. You don't need me. This is wonderful to decrease stress. So that's a good one. Shed nails. So the main reason why cats are motivated to scratch is boils down to two basic things. Is nail maintenance. So a lot of you said sharpening their claws. So it is a requirement, a necessity for cats to sink those claws into something that they can attach to, so that when they pull back, it's going to help shed the outer layers. If any of you worked with older arthritic cats and you've seen those gnarly, thick, awful nails, that's what happens when they lose that ability to scratch. So it's super important, essential, natural, as many of you have commented. And then the second piece is marking. And so marking in two ways, actually. So they scent and pheromone deposit. So in between the pads of their feet, there are pheromone glands. So they are depositing pheromones and scents. And so pheromones are a little different than scents because they're detected by a certain part of the brain, and that's how animals communicate with each other from a distance and send messages to each other. And then the second part of marking, it's a visual mark. So the reason cats love that couch corner right in the middle of your living room is because it makes a huge mess, right? So A, it's the perfect texture for pulling out those outer layers of the nails. And B, it leaves a huge visual message. It's basically that, those of you as old as me, remember AOL, you've got mail. That little flag, right? That's what the cat is doing, leaving this big visual signal that says, open me, check me out, smell me. So the other cats, if they were to see that, would approach it, would sniff it. They might gape a little bit to take in pheromones, and they'd get the message that the other cat left, right? So there is a reason why they are drawn to that couch. So as Ellen mentioned, this is such a natural, innate behavior, and again, necessary behavior, that we want to be able to provide appropriate outlets for it. Because if we don't, it can be physically dangerous for them, and also super stressful to not have the ability to do that very natural, normal behavior. And so providing items that allow them to fully stretch. So I heard someone mention stretch. They want to scratch to stretch. So most commonly, the most common time for cats to want to stretch is after they've been resting. So and where they wake up and they want to fully stretch and they want to scratch. So having furniture or cat trees or scratching posts in areas where cats spend time, where they're going to rest and feel very comfortable, and when they're likely to stretch and scratch. And so it's typically the middle of a room. It's not in the basement or in the far corner where no one can see it, because we don't want people to know we have cats and have cat trees all over the place. But you'd be surprised that, whether it's a piece of furniture, because again, that is ideal, cats love it, or it's a post, again, it needs to be pretty appealing. And every cat is different. Some cats prefer a horizontal post, some prefer something up high. You have to see what your cat's doing. If they're scratching the carpet along the stairs of your home, that's probably an indication that they're a horizontal scratcher, meaning they go like this. If it's all the corners of your couch, they're a vertical scratcher. So you want to look for options for them. There's also a great new product called Feel a Scratch, which is a cat scratch attractant that you can place on your scratching post, placing that post next to where they are scratching, and it will make that more appealing than the couch. And over time, you can move it further and further away from their preferred area. You can also use double-sided tape and sticky things so that it's not as appealing to them. We don't want to get into scaring them or putting anything aversive there, because that can create a whole ball of issues, which I won't go into now. But debunked, cats rarely scratch because they're bored. I have occasionally seen cats increase their scratching because of stress, more of a displacement behavior. But again, more commonly, it is a normal, natural behavior to shed the outer layer of their nails and to mark.
Now, who in this room, because this is like one of those things that cats do, when we typically see clients that want to scold their cats because they're scratching the most inappropriate object in the house, and they're scratching and you kind of see them doing it. You're like, wait a second, what are you doing? And the cat looks at you like, I'm scratching. And you're like coming over to kind of displace that behavior, and they scratch even faster and then they run off.
Yeah, right. Because they anticipate
Why would they do
you're going to
something like
stop
that?
them. Well, cats are so smart, right? If they anticipate, like, oh, this is a behavior I have to do, I'm so driven, and I got to do it fast because she's going to stop me from doing it, right? Otherwise, they learn, you're watching, so I will. It's not safe to do this in front of you, so So I'll do it when you're not looking, which brings me to our next myth, which is using a spray bottle is the best way to keep off countertops. And you could insert best way to stop cats from scratching where you don't want them to, or best way to stop A, B, C, and D, right? It's this awful squirt bottle that seems to be very popular in a lot of Google searches when you look at how to stop unwanted cat behaviors. So I see, haha, it does nothing. The cats wait until you leave or aren't home. No, this doesn't work, especially when your cat likes water. Yes, I have seen cats that are entertained by it. It definitely does not solve it. I never use a spray bottle. It hurts the relationship with your cat. Thank you very much, Haley Richardson. That is really great. You guys know what you're doing. All right.
What are your feelings then on the counter surfers with the those static mats or the little electric mats that you see that are labeled as well for cats that prevent them from being counter surfers?
Yeah. So what we're talking about there is something that elicits pain, right? It's a static or shock. So when they jump onto the countertop, it shocks their feet and they jump off. So while, yes, that's going to be there every time the cat goes, it's not associated with you. So it's less likely to damage the human animal bond. It's very risky when you use pain to punish behavior in cats because cats are so utterly sensitive. The paws of their feet are such a sensitive part of their body. You can create an aversion of the kitchen. You can create an aversion of, and by aversion, I mean a fear of whoever's in the kitchen at the time. You're going to potentially see, for very sensitive cats, them start to urine mark as a stress response. So while some cats that are very resilient may learn, okay, I'm never going on that countertop again, there's just potential repercussions or consequences to their welfare, as well as to see other behaviors come out that can be a big problem. It's also really helpful to remember that jumping on a countertop is very normal. It's again back to a lot of these undesirable behaviors we see in cats are actually very normal for them. They like to be up high. Cats really prefer a place that's high, up, that gives them a nice vantage point, and our countertops tend to be that way. It also tends to be a place where we spend a lot of time, and so they jump on the countertops to be close to us. I feel like my cat does that. I'm brushing my teeth every night. My cat gets toothpaste all over her because she's up there rubbing underneath my chin because she knows I'm stuck in one place for at least a few minutes. So it's very normal to that. And so to try to just punish a very normal behavior without providing other outlets is not going to solve the issue. So spray bottles in particular, just like the shock mats, what's worse about spray bottles, in my opinion, is that it's associated with the person, right? So then this person holding the spray bottle becomes scary, and that can be very damaging to the human-animal bond. And it can also, as I mentioned earlier, lead to other stress-related behaviors like urine marking or peeing in other places that we're not wanting them to. And the other thing is that cats, they also learn, just like you talked about with the cat scratching, they learn that if you're not around, it's safe to do those behaviors. And so I joke with a lot of my clients of, what's the first thing you hear when you walk into your kitchen? Doo-doo. All the cats jumping onto the floor, right? So they just simply learn, okay, it's safe to be up here when no one's around. It's not safe to be up here when you are around. Plain and simple, easy peasy, right? But it does, if your goal is to not have paws that were just in a litter box on top of where you're making food, then it doesn't really help your issue. And so what we want to do is provide normal, natural outlets for them. So if the countertop is not a desirable place for you, like I don't mind if my cat's on my bathroom counter rubbing all over me when I brush my teeth. I don't mind that. I'll disinfect the counters regularly. But some of us don't feel that way. So what we might do is have cat trees, cat furnitures, or areas that are even more appealing. So even higher than the countertop. Again, cats want to be up high. Cats that are a little nervous probably going to prefer to be more on the periphery of a room, which is why the countertops are also appealing because they tend to line the periphery of our kitchen. So thinking of placing perches or areas for them to be elevated and on the periphery and close to you, right? Those of us working at home during the pandemic, right? Where are they? Right here on our keyboards, on our laps, messing with our mouse. Well, let's place a nice heated cat bed up high, maybe even higher than our desk, right next to us. So they're getting the comfort of being close to us. They're able to be up high, and it's a heated, elevated bed. So it's even more appealing than your computer or your desk where all your stuff is, and just making sure you're giving them attention. So the spray bottle to stop that behavior in that moment might get them off of where they are, but it has very negative consequences potentially. It doesn't really solve the issue, right? They need other outlets. You're going to see a theme to this as we go through each of these myths. All right, number 3, it's normal for cats to hide all the time. Anyone who have cats that hide a lot? Oh, no. Nope. Many don't hide. False. Right. So it is not normal for cats to hide all the time. I think cats got a bad rap for being asocial for a long time, and they are way more social than we think. What we've seen in group living cats, so feral cat colonies, is that when there are abundant resources, meaning someone's feeding them a lot of food, you're going to attract a lot of cats, and they actually live in groups very well. They have a matriarchal society where you see moms and aunts raising litter after litter. They stay together. Males are interspersed in and out. Some are in living with the colony. Some are sort of in and out, breeding and leaving. But it's very common for them to be social. And so cats who are socialized to people are going to live amongst that social group just like they would other cats. Now, they don't see us as other cats, but they're going to live amongst us in our social group. And so if we are providing abundant resources for them, they shouldn't be hiding all the time. And so if you're having a cat that's hiding all the time, it's indicating typically one of two things. Either they're painful, they're not feeling well, or they're afraid. And as I said, so some cats who maybe weren't socialized well to people. So kittens need to be socialized to everything they're going to be around as an adult at a very early age. Technically that age is 2 to 7 weeks, but I would expand that up to 12 weeks because I've seen a lot of kittens who've had exposure, who are essentially feral till 8 weeks of age and do very well with social exposure between 8 and 12 weeks of age. So probably can expand it a little further. But if they were not around any people before 12 weeks of age, it can be challenging for them, particularly new people. So they're going to hide because they're afraid of people, and it will take them a while to come out. For a cat that has been typically social and now is suddenly hiding all the time, I am worried. If there's not a major change in the household, like a new baby or a new dog, if that's happening, it's probably because the cat is afraid of that new baby or that new dog. But if nothing else is changing in the environment and they're suddenly hiding, I'm very suspicious they're not feeling well. Whether that's pain, whether that's abdominal discomfort, whether that's just an overall feeling of malaise or not feeling well, I'm very worried. So I definitely want my hiding cats to be checked out by their vet. And that can be true for the new. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You sit there and you talk about how cats are more social than we think. And you're talking about pain or any kind of medical problems that are going on with them. What about the households that you actually have a cat that prefers to be that single cat? Mm-hmm. Well, there's the theory out there that cats that are living indoors don't have a true territory preference or hierarchy, which I struggle with kind of believing that. What are your thoughts on the cats that are like, hey, I like being top cat and I don't want any other cats in my home? Are those the cats that are kind of like that low percentage that they don't want to be social with their own species and they would prefer the comfort of humans versus another cat?
A great question. I think the answer is complicated. I think a lot of it depends on their early experience, right? If people are wanting to have a multi-cat household, I'm typically recommending they're getting young cats at the same time. So littermate cats actually tend to do very well together. Cats that are obtained at a young age together tend to do well together. And if they grow up, especially that first year of life, having amicable relationships with other cats, they're going to have a nice memory of social interactions with other cats. And so they're going to be more welcoming of cats as they come in. I think it also depends on how we introduce them, right? Dr. Emily Levine published a great study about how cats that are fighting with each other, how they were introduced drastically greatly predicts how they're going to be able to get along, right? If their introduction was traumatizing, too fast, and they fought right away, they're likely it's going to be difficult for them to get along. So I think you have a lot of different personality types, just like people. And some cats, it's a little bit for just a short amount of time, and then I need my own space. Others just want to be close to other cats all the time, all day long. But I see your average cat tolerates other cats, maybe enjoys a couple of cats, but can coexist as long as the resources are abundant. Think about what's important to cats: food, attention from people, water, access to litter box, and scratching posts. But I think those cats that want to be alone, it may not be a top cat thing, right? It may be that they're kind of afraid of other cats. They just don't have in their repertoire happy memories of living with other cats, either because they had a bad experience as a kitten or they just lack that experience. Potentially they were, adopted out at 5-6 weeks of age without a whole lot of experience growing up their littermates. And if they only ever lived with people, their social brain kind of changes, like, well, people are my social group and not necessarily cats. So then to suddenly at 10 years old, try to put a bunch of kittens in the house with them might be hard on them. and it
Right.
feels
So did you
awkward to
feel
them.
that, do you feel that falls underneath the category? Because we actually had someone that just asked that question just above. Do cats really see themselves as see us as big cats, or do they see themselves kind of as like they're human, especially those singleton babies that grow up that they don't have the exposure
Yeah.
to other cats? Do they actually see themselves as a human that you guys
Oh,
don't speak the
sometimes I
same
wonder that.
language?
Sometimes I wonder that. And we can see that with a lot of species, right? If we insert ourselves into their lives and exclude their own species, and I wish they could speak and tell us that. So I think it's probably somewhere in between, right? I don't think they see us as other cats because clearly our body language is very different. And while we might do some slow blinking to try to calm them down, we don't have a tail. We don't have ears that move in the same way that theirs do. And so I think they learn to adapt, but I think they don't necessarily see us as the same species. And I think it's extremely rare to see an intact cat attempt to mate with their human folks. Now, again, in lots of species that can happen, but typically it's an aberration or an abnormality. Cats that are intact or whole will be drawn to mate with their same species, and that's pretty rare to see that with humans. Again, never say never, but it would be pretty abnormal, pretty unusual. So I think it's, again, I just like the term social group member. They just see us as a social group member, as a companion, but not necessarily the same species. And I don't know that it matters all that much, except what we don't want to do is try to act like a cat necessarily, or be a cat, right? Just recognize what their limitations are, what their preferences are, and that every cat is an individual. And I think as far as group living, that goes the same. But I would say hiding is not because cats are just naturally asocial. It's because they're not used to group living, they're afraid, or they're not feeling well. Great question. Okay, so number 4, I need to get moving. I'm blabbering too much. All right,
You've got
number
a
4.
great topic. Everybody loves it. So you're going to have a
All
lot of
right.
questions.
This is a good one for Ellen, I think, right? You're probably more of an expert on this subject than me, but orphan kittens are more aggressive than non-orphan kittens. So kittens compared to kittens that are queen reared.
Well, if you're asking me that question,
Why is
honestly,
this a
I
myth?
feel like it's the fault that we don't have another cat that teaches them how to cat. They don't learn appropriate behaviors, and then we play with them incorrectly. So we try to mimic cat play with them, and then our feelings get hurt when they decide to unleash the teeth and the claws, and then we're trying to correct that behavior, and now the cat's confused. So I think you wind up setting this poor kitten up for failure, simply because you don't know how to play with them properly and let them learn how to actually be a cat, because kittens by nature are very tactile, and they like to bite and touch and taste, and we don't want that behavior in human children. So we tend to anthropomorphize those feelings on our kittens, and then they don't know how to be a cat.
No, I think it's very true. And I feel like anecdotally, we feel like kittens have some of these tendencies more so than queen reared cats. But as far as being aggressive, so cats having fear aggression or other territorial aggression problems, we actually don't have that. It's like hand reared kittens have a higher incidence of that. And I think this speaks to what you were saying, Ellen, right? When we don't play appropriate with them, when we use our hands and we react inappropriately, these cats don't do well. So what someone did publish a study on is that if we are engaging cats with wand toys, meaning something that is extended and not part of our hand, so interactive toys that put distance between our body parts and the cat's mouths and their claws, as well as having another cat in the home, are correlated with a lower incidence of human-directed aggression. So I think that speaks to exactly what you were saying, is when we're using inappropriate means to provide them those outlets for those normal natural behaviors, we tend not to see it redirected on ourselves. But we've tried, because we all feel that way, that cats that are biters were probably hand reared. But we don't have a final correlation on that. I think that there's plenty of cats that were queen reared. If they're put in human households and are inappropriately playing with them, that they have trouble, just like our orphan kittens do. So thinking about starting off the bat very young with appropriate play. It's so tempting, right? These kittens are so cute, and it's so cute when their tiny little teeth just chew on our fingers. And then a month later, those tiny teeth are very sharp and there's more pressure from the jaw, and suddenly it's not fun anymore. But that kitten was just raised through one of their most, influential parts of their development to think that human hands are a toy, and then expect them to suddenly get that that's not okay is really tough on them. So starting off kittens with appropriate one toys, or again, getting a second cat. I mean, that's the only time I've ever told people that getting another pet might help resolve a behavior issue, because typically my answer is no, 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 unless you really want to have another pet in your home. But for inappropriate or misdirected play behavior for cats on humans, having a second kitten in the home often resolves that, because it's a norm. All these things, all these myths we're talking about, they're normal, natural behaviors that are just a bit misdirected, or they're directed in a way that's undesirable to the people, right? From the cat, it's not misdirected at all. Seems very appropriate from their perspective. It's just undesirable from our end. And so if we can
Dr.
set
Herron,
them up
you're
with that
talking
early.
about when you're actually having another cat in a home to help raise the cat. What is your feelings on, because most people think like the mom always needs to raise these kittens and they actually need to teach them actually how to be a cat. Well, then you have the subset of all these male cats that love kittens. What is your feelings on those cats? Are they the ones that, do you notice that these male cats have a tendency to be more relaxed and more, the word I want to say is like more chill about having kittens to kind of raise, because they're not the ones that are doing like the full-time job of the full mothering. They're just kind of comforting and play, and they have their way of, teaching the kitten how to cat, but they're not, completely responsible for all the care.
That's a good question. And I think I've seen it both ways. I've seen queens who've had experience with kittens and had litters tend to be excellent kitten raisers. But you can have queens do a very good job who've never had kittens, and then you have these males, which doesn't make sense. And you can see, I mean, there's something called concaviation, which is the sort of induction of maternal behaviors without any hormones or ever giving birth. And we can see that happen in males as well, where they just take on there's something about the movement of kittens, the vocalizations of kittens, and their facial, the neotenous facial features. By that, I mean, big eyes, big ears, right? That helpless, sort of adorable look. Same with babies. It's so that they get taken care of, right? And so that can actually happen to males too. And I've seen some of these, there's like this big male syndrome where, and whether it's because of their size, they just have this, like you said, chill nature about them. And I think what goes with chill is confidence. They're very confident. They're not afraid of kittens. I think where we get into inner cat problems, where there's a kitten starting to torment an older cat, it's because that older cat isn't used to kittens and the older cat's afraid of the kitten. So what happens when a cat's afraid? They run away. What does a kitten do when something runs away from it? It chases, and then the game ensues. I think these boys tend to be more chill, more confident. They're not going to run away from a kitten. They're going to run right up to them and be right in their face. And then it's more of a playmate for that kitten rather than something to attack or to chase. So you just tend to run into fewer problems. On the flip side of that, some of these big boys can become big bullies, and that if the other cats are afraid of them, it becomes a good game of chase if that bully cat or big boy cat is not giving its own outlets for entertainment and play himself. That's very cool.
Good point.
Okay, cat's urine marked to show dominance. This is my place. I own you. I own this. I'm mad that you got a dog, so I'm going to show him who's boss by peeing on his bed. That's not true. I'm just quoting what my clients say.
Do cats mark out of spite?
So, I'm getting to spite later. Okay, I'm not going to go there yet. But, so I'm seeing territorial, fear, not always, can be a medical problem, UTI, stress in big letters, says Jennifer B. All of the above, absolutely. So without getting on too much of a soapbox, let's talk a little bit about dominance. So dominance, by definition, it's a status, not a character trait, but a status that's achieved by having preferential access to resources over another social group member. Meaning, with repeated interactions, one cat always seems to get better access to the food bowl, better access to their person, to the water bowl, and the other cat's sort of going, okay, I'll give you a wide berth, I'll defer, I'll let you go. And so then one would say, well, this cat is dominant over this other cat because he's getting better access to this resource. The thing about cats that makes them funny is that they don't tend to form that linear hierarchy or pecking order that we often attribute to other species. what happens, so, and we know this because Dr. Sharon Carl Davis and her graduate students did some great studies of this household in Athens, Georgia, that had between 30 and 40 cats at a time, this giant enclosed yard, giant house, and they had multiple sort of stations for all of their resources because they clearly weren't going to have 40 food bowls, 40 litter boxes. And so graduate students would just sit and observe and try to map out the social hierarchies to see which cat was getting better access to food, to litter, to anything else that was important to cats. And what they found is that while cat A always got access to the food bowl over cat B always got access to the food bowl over cat C, but then cat C got preferential access over cat A. And so they'd form these triangles. So often what we see in cats is either dyads, meaning it's just between two cats and nobody else cares, or we see these triangles of who has access to resources, but it's all about resources. So depositing urine is unrelated to getting access to resources at all. It has nothing to do with dominance or social status. Dominance has all to do with what's important to me, what's going to keep me alive, and do I get to it first, or do you get to it first? And we have to have repeated opportunities to figure this out before achieving that status. And it is a status, as I said, not something that you're born as just being a dominant cat, right? You are only dominant to or over another individual. And it's pretty uncommon to see that it's A's over B's over C. You can occasionally have what we call that despotic social group where one cat is really like kind of king of the world and all the other cats just give him wide berth. But that's probably because one cat is big and they know that they can win in all of these challenges. And so the other cats just let them be. And the rest of them don't really care about their interactions between each other. So dominance is not all that important in cat group living. And where it becomes more important is when resources are scarce, right? So if you're not living in a home where you're fed a lot, or you're out on your own and there's not a lot of prey to catch, well, then you might see more fighting over resources. And there may have to be an established hierarchy so that everybody gets along, because fighting and aggression between cats is dangerous and expensive. So it really is a waste of their time and energy to do so if they're living in a feral or wild environment. And so they use these hierarchies to sort of figure that out. But back to urine marking. So it's unrelated to gaining access to resource. Cats mark to leave a message. And so first of all, if your cat's going outside the litter box, you need to look for a medical reason before you even know if it's marking. And then we have to decide if this is urine marking or a toileting problem, right? Because they're different. The patterns are different. Toileting is squatting and voiding a bladder. Marking is purposely depositing typically, not always, a small amount of urine just to leave a message. I was here, I have something to say. Often it's about stress. So it could be that I'm stressed out about that dog, and so I'm going to urine mark on his bed because I need to leave that message that I'm stressed out about it, right? So it's not about spite, as you said. It's not about dominance. It's typically about stress or pain. So urinary tract pain. We'll see a lot of cats will urine mark, meaning they just leave a small amount. They don't try to cover it up because they're painful. The pain of urinary, I mean, gosh, there's enough women here who had UTIs. I'm sure it's horribly painful. And so if a cat's struggling with urinary tract problems, it's stressful for them, and that might cause them to urine mark. So not at all about dominance, not about spite. And I'll talk more about spite on our last myth.
Right. So you talk about the urine marking. Is it true that only male cats are the ones that tend to mark, or do female cats actually mark the same way on a vertical surface?
That's a great question. So intact animals. So it is normal for an intact tomcat to urine mark up to 12 times an hour. Whereas an intact female, that typically tends to only happen when she's in heat. If you're talking about sexual signaling, again, cats who are roaming over a wide range of territory need to leave messages for each other, kind of like, here's my digits. That's their Tinder, right? Is they're leaving their sexual kind of profile in a urine mark. So that's very normal. And intact females tend to do it when they're in heat. And Ben Hart actually published a study years ago at looking at the incidence of neutered animals and how much they spray urine, so marking specifically. And he found that 10% at that time of neutered males were still reported to mark, and only 5% of females. But that's still 5 out of 100. So while I think it's a little more common, if we were to tally up all of the cats that are marking urine, it's a little more common in males, but 5% is still can be a lot in females. And again, if they're intact, it's completely normal. That is sexual signaling. You're not going to stop that behavior. Territorial marking, although territorial is to be debated in cats right now because they're not, seeing defined territories in feral cats with more kind of overlapping core areas, but most likely it's stress. And you can be stressed whether you're a male or female, right? It doesn't matter. I think 20, 30 years ago, everybody thought this was a sexually driven behavior and that neutered cats were doing this with some residual testosterone. And so they were putting them on Ovaban and other birth control hormones to try to treat that urine marking. And I think what they discovered is that there is a receptor for estrogen hormones on the benzodiazepine or the GABA channels. It's just the same place a drug like Valium is going to bind. And so there are some calming effects of estrogen treatments. And that's probably why these boy cats stopped peeing when they were treated with that, if that makes any sense. So we don't advocate for treating urine marking with sex hormones anymore. So birth control, basically, because the side effect profile is very dangerous for cats. So if we recognize it's not a medical problem, it's not a normal sexual signaling, and it is indeed out of stress, we look at how do we modify the environment? How do we try to reduce, relieve, give you refuge from your stress? And if needed, on top of that, we might use an anti-anxiety medication, not a birth control.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. So number 6, when cats roll around on their back, it means they want a belly rub. How many of you have tried this at home? And what happened when you did that? Danger. Oh. Yes. It means they trust you. Very good. They trust you not to rub their belly, right? So what I would say about belly rubs, because you hear this a lot, it's seldom that cats enjoy a belly rub. Rolling on the back means play, comfort, contentment. As someone said, they trust you, right? They're feeling comfortable enough to show you a very vulnerable part of their body. Now, if they're rolling on their back with their ears back, claws out, then that means they're showing you their weapons, and that might be a sign of fear aggression. But the cat that's really limbs extended, eyes half closed, ears are relaxed, showing their belly is just doing so because they're feeling comfort, they're feeling that trust. But it's sensitive, and it's a very vulnerable position for them to be in. And so if we touch them there, suddenly that can trigger them to bite us. I will say there are exceptions to this rule. There are some cats, and I'm seeing some comments here for their cats, like, oh, armpit scratch, that's a new one for me, that do enjoy it. And I had a conversation about this with Dr. Carl Davis, who is a kind of a feline guru for behavior. And her experience is that cats that are intact or are queens that have had multiple litters tend to find comfort in tactile stimulation of their belly. And her theory was that because they'd nursed kittens so much and had such a release of oxytocin over so much time, which is the bonding hormone, that they actually enjoyed the belly rub. So I would say there are exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, cats do not enjoy the belly rubs. And it's often something that's going to trigger them to kind of grab and bite. Again, everybody knows their own cats, but I think for a brand new cat family, to err on the side of safety and allow your cat to show you that trust and scratch them on the top of their head rather than scratching them on their belly. All right, number 7, cats need to be taught to go to the bathroom in a litter box. Meaning you've got to, like a dog, you take your dog outside, you give them a treat. For cats, you got to put them in the litter box every so often to get them to go. So I'm seeing it's natural, it's an instinct. Oh, you guys are good. So the nice thing about cats, as opposed to dogs, is that they're going to naturally seek out a fine, sandy texture for their elimination. This means they need clear, easily accessible options so that if we don't provide a fine, sandy texture that's easy for them to find, to access, and get into, they're going to search for the next best thing. And I learned this the hard way when I was living with my mother before vet school, and silly me thought putting just a litter box in the basement would be good enough. Well, no, all the potted plants that were upstairs were an easier target because the potted plants had that fine sandy texture and we could dig in them, we could eliminate them and cover them right up. So, but you typically don't have to teach them, right? You just give them, like, it's clear. And I've had some kittens where, again, if your house is really big, you might have to confine them to just part of the house with that litter box so they learn where it is and how to get to it before they explore the whole house. And then having multiple areas for that litter box that's easy for them to find and to get to. Because yes, they are drawn to that. It's instinctual that they look for that. Very rarely, and Ellen, you might be able to speak to this, we've seen in some of the purebreds I've seen have a preference for hardwood or bathtubs, but that is pretty uncommon. And I would say most of the cats I've seen who have odd preferences for something that's a hard surface have probably had a painful or negative experience in a regular litter box. And so they've developed new preferences.
Or they're the cats that have the overabundance of toe floof and they just don't like getting litter stuck in their feet.
Love it. Yes. Yes, toe floof, right. So that's the thing that people don't realize. Again, another reason why Decoding Your Cat is so great, because we talk about all these things. Particularly if you have a medium hair or long haired cat, your toe floof, which I'm totally going to steal that term now. If we're not trimming it, then especially for the clumping clay litter, it's going to get stuck in there if there's any amount of moisture, and it's really uncomfortable for them. And then that can cause them to avoid using that litter box. So it's going against their own instinct because they've learned it's uncomfortable. But for the most part, your average cat is going to have a preference for a fine texture like clumping clay. So clumping clay litter, typically we recommend unscented, although veterinary behaviorist Jackie Nielsen has done some research suggesting that if kittens were exposed to scented litter at a young age and learned to use that and like it, then they may actually prefer or enjoy scented litters. But the safest way to go would be unscented clumping clay litter because it's just so fine and sandy. And when they urinate, you can scoop it and all of that scent is gone. And so we want to be, again, with clumping clay, scooping these litter boxes every day, if not twice a day, depending on if you have multiple cats. So that's a nice clean. Just think about it as a toilet. Like you would not go into a toilet that wasn't flushed, particularly if it was another family member that went to the bathroom and didn't flush. So if you have cats, particularly with multiple cats, you want to make sure you're scooping it daily. Otherwise, they're going to avoid something that should be a nice natural preference for them. And it's a reason why sandboxes, we always want to cover our sandboxes outside because those outdoor cats just see that sandbox as a nice, big, easy, accessible litter box, and it'd be very normal and natural for them to use it. So smell of the litter also plays a role in the usage, absolutely. So if it's stinky, that toilet's not flushed, then they probably are going to want to avoid it. On the flip side, if it's heavily perfumed, sometimes that can be very aversive for them as well. All right, so number 8, cats lick themselves bald due to stress. Any of you seen this? I guess I should say the myth is that they always lick themselves bald. The reason they do that is only due to stress. All right, allergies, skin issues, could be medical. Maybe they're bored. My cat did at one point. Yes, very good. Okay, so what we have discovered as we're looking at these cats who are presenting to us for overgrooming, most of cases of these are a result of a medical condition. So whether that's dermatologic, so that's going to be for cats, dermatologic conditions are going to be either a flea allergy dermatitis, which is easily remedied with appropriate flea prevention. It's going to be food allergies. So they're allergic to what they eat, and that manifests through skin being itchy, which feels a little weird, but think of it like some kids who have an allergy, they might break out in hives. While it might not be hives in cats, it's a similar concept that they eat something, they're allergic to it, and it causes their skin to be inflamed and to be itchy. And that's going to cause hair loss. That's going to cause them to want to lick because it's itchy and uncomfortable. And you'll see them evolve. It can also be a result of environmental allergies. So just like we might have allergies that are seasonal, some cats can have that as well. They breathe in whatever they're allergic to, and it again causes that skin to get inflamed and to be itchy, and they start to lick. It can also be a sign of gastrointestinal discomfort. So particularly if it's on their belly, so that ventral abdominal area, if that's the main focus, sometimes it means their belly hurts, right? If they are cats, I've seen a lot of cats do this, have a history of obstipation or chronic constipation. That's painful to cats. And so their way of coping with that, they don't understand, oh, I haven't pooped in 3 days. That's why my belly hurts. They don't necessarily have that rational thought process. They just know it hurts. And maybe if I lick it, cats are such oral creatures anyways, maybe if I lick it, that's going to make me feel better. And with that repetitive behavior of licking, there is an endorphin release. So some cats will start to feel a little better with that repetitive movement. But you definitely want to look at where they are licking to tell you what medical condition we might want to be searching for. So for example, orthopedic pain. So cats that are licking a specific limb or a specific part of their body, it could be because it's painful. So I've seen cats with fractures of one of their limbs, a broken tail, that they start to lick there because it's hurting them. And so when we actually did a meta-analysis of put in cases of cats who were presenting to their vet for what they call psychogenic alopecia, or over grooming themselves bald, fewer than 25% of those cases were actually, we could attribute to compulsive behaviors or stress related behaviors. So that's probably because we couldn't find the medical reason. So, and this can be a bit of a witch hunt, right? Your vet really needs to dig and look hard. So, you know, dermatologic, so we want to treat for the potential for fleas. We want to maybe do a trial of a different food to see if they're allergic to that. Sometimes we can even do a biopsy, just a quick small biopsy of the skin to see if there's evidence of inflammation that's not self-inflicted, but rather indicative of a skin inflammation. You know, doing an x-ray of that belly, if they're licking their belly, doing an x-ray of a body part that they are licking bald, to try to really uncover what the underlying issue is. And then if we've ruled all that out, then we treat it like a stress-related or compulsive behavior disorder by, again, okay, where's their outlet for their normal natural behaviors? How can we enrich their environment to reduce their stress and allow them to engage in behaviors for which they're highly driven to perform? How can we mitigate the stress that they're under? Is there a way that we can provide refuge for whatever it is that's stressing them out? And in some cases, we will treat them with an anti-anxiety medication to help them cope better with whatever stress it is we can't mitigate. All right, number 9, cats prematurely separated from their mom will never know how to hunt. Is this true? Another question for Ellen, probably. I see no, false. But their mom never taught them. How do they know how to do it? It's natural, it's instinct. Yes, you guys are good. So cats are innately drawn to chase small, fast-moving things. It's a different part of the brain. The medial hippocampus is what I remember studying for boards. It's hardwired. So what we call a fixed action pattern. They're predators, and they're predators on things that move very quickly. And so their brain is primed for something moves quickly past me, I'm going to be drawn to it. And they go through what we call that predatory sequence of see it, stare, stalk, hunch, pounce, grab, shake, consume. Right now, I would say some of our cats aren't so great at the consuming part. If your cat's ever found a mouse in your house and just used it to torment it, which unfortunately I have seen one too many times. I probably shouldn't reveal that about my house. We don't have a major mouse problem, but when you live in the woods.
Has there ever been a study on why cats do that butt wiggle and rev up before they actually pounce while they're hunting?
I'm not aware of a study, but I would assume they're kind of, it's like getting like they're revving their engine, right? Like they're ready to go. So it's getting they're kind of getting the muscles warmed up so that they make that one little pounce, because a lot of the power is coming from those back limbs, right? All the muscles of those thighs to boom, pounce as hard as they can. And these cats can pounce, right? So there's a lot of strength in those back legs. So I would assume that they are warming it up, just warming up the engine, right? So, I mean, what I'll hear a lot of people say when you have an argument of allowing cats to be outdoors or having them indoor outdoors, and well, they're not going to hurt the songbird population because they were hand raised, right? They never had mom to teach them. They never learned how to hunt, so they're not going to do that. And that's just not the case, right? They see a bird that moves quickly past them, you know, and there are some cats that just have a preference and they aren't interested in birds, but you can't rely on a lack of experience to say that they're safe from hunting small animals or birds in your backyard or in the woods. So they learn how to do it. Now, I will say that maternal preferences can have influence. So if a kitten is raised by their queen in a feral or wild environment, if mom had a preference for mice, the babies they're going to grow up and have a preference for mice as well, or rats or rabbits or birds. So they can be influenced by the preference of their mothers, but they don't need mom to teach them to have that instinct to want to hunt things that are moving quickly. Okay, last myth. Ellen's been waiting for this. Cats chew on your cords and eat plastic out of spite. So we could talk about all these things out of spite and why that's a myth. So what do you think? A, are
I
cats
have a
spiteful?
plastic
And
licker
B,
at work. I can relate.
What's that?
Our clinic cat loves to lick plastic bags. I mean, that is her thing. Do we think it's out of spite? Probably not. We just think she likes plastic bags.
Plastic is yummy. Fish oil. Mine licks the plastic shower curtain liner. Oh, because it's wet, of course.
Licking photographs. That's a good one too. I've seen cats do that as well. Everybody
loves
can
chewing.
relate to this question.
Yes, yes. So, all right. So it's a twofold myth, really. So first, let's address cord and plastic chewing. So it can be dangerous, right? So cats that are chewing on cords that are plugged in can get electrocuted or shocked in their mouth because there was an electric current going through that cord. And plastic, if they are ingesting it, can be very dangerous because plastic is not going to digest. Stomach acid is not going to break down plastic. So if they're consuming plastic cords or consuming bits of plastic, like trash bags or grocery bags, that's going in, it can create a linear foreign body, which can be very, very dangerous. So the first thing I want to think of, I think there are cats that just like plastic. I think they like the feel in their teeth, and that's just the best outlet for them. I think some of them like maybe the static electric feel on their tongue, because there's something about plastic, like the repetitive licking or touch of that has a bit of static to it. I think the shower curtain is probably because it's wet, and they love that option of licking something that's wet. But my strange addiction, yes. So I think some cats, it can be a normal behavior, but if your cat suddenly starts chewing cords or licking plastic, I want to see what's going on with their belly. So particularly cats that are ingesting items. So cats that are ingesting non-food items, somebody mentioned pica. So pica means the ingestion of non-food items. So if you're seeing pica, I'm worried that there's gastrointestinal discomfort. So this is true for dogs and for cats. So we see dogs that are presenting for carpet licking. They're excessively licking carpet, the furniture, and people. And they're coming to a behaviorist thinking it's anxiety, or they're thinking it's a behavior problem, something's wrong with them, when actually that's their way of coping with GI discomfort. So if your belly hurts, the more you lick, the more saliva you're going to produce, which can decrease the pH of your stomach acid, which helps increase GI comfort. But the other part is that if they don't have an enriched environment where there's lots to chew on that fits what their preferences are, then they're just going to go for what's available. And so that gets tricky, right? Because what if your cat's preferences is cords and is plastic? Trying to be able to provide safe outlets for that is essential. So finding toys or making your own, whether it's out of cords or out of something similar that is not plugged in clearly, or is not something that's going to be dangerous for them to ingest. But then the flip side of that is for cats that are really into chewing things that are dangerous, is we want to make those areas either inaccessible or unappealing. And in some cases, I do go as far as spraying that with a bitter spray or a spicy spray or wasabi, so that if they do try to chew that, they learn, ooh, that's yucky. It's not painful, but it tastes really bad. So it's unpleasant to them, because if they try to chew through that cord, they could get themselves shocked or electrocuted. But I wouldn't ever recommend just put bitter spray or spicy stuff on all your cords and not provide another outlet, because that's even more stressful. Well, I have this natural, normal preference to want to chew on these things, and now it tastes terrible and I have no other options. You have to do both. You make what they're doing that's undesirable to us or dangerous to them unappealing, but then provide outlets that are very appealing and easily accessible to them and really fit their individual preferences. And I stress heavily the individual part of that, because every cat is different. Every cat is unique in what they prefer and like and dislike. All right.
This
so
has been
that is the
an
end.
amazing talk. Thank you so much. And the thing is, like, we've had so many questions that actually have been submitted ahead of time. And one of the reasons why chit-chatting back and forth with you about kind of like decoding the cats a little bit further in every single one of your slides, because a lot of these touch base on the questions that everybody was actually submitting. If you guys do have a medical question in regards to your cat, we got a lot of those. Please see your veterinarian first before seeking the help of a behaviorist, because remember, they go hand in hand on top of it. And don't forget to check out the book, Decoding Your Cat. I mean, go ahead, grab a book, sit down and read it, and maybe you'll get all the answers you've been looking for by simply, reading, about your favorite subject, which is cats. And on top of this, we actually are giving away a couple of prizes, and one of them is your book. So if we do have Glenn Takayama available, I need you to raise your hand in our message boxes here to let us know that you're here, so you can get your own copy of Decoding Your Cat. And our second prize is for Gail Smith. You won the custom pet portrait. We need you to raise your hand as well, to let us know that you're available. If we don't see you guys messaging us, we do have some backup winners as well, and Basepaws will be reaching out to you individually if no one's reached out to us. But you got 1 minute. So
Chris raised a hand.
Go ahead and talk about your book for one last minute and tell us why we need to get it.
Oh, very good. Well, thank you for being such a great audience. This is really fun to be interactive. I saw those questions ahead of time and thought, oh, I think we're going to get to most of these. But as Ellen mentioned, a lot of you have specific questions about your personal pets. And a lot of them, I would say, support the recommendation to please visit your veterinarian. Please keep that relationship healthy. If you're not happy with your veterinarian, there's a lot of us out here, and it may just be not the best match for you or your cat. And so find one where you feel like you have trust and you have comfort and you can schedule, even if you think, well, this is unusual. I bet there's nothing really wrong. I don't want to bother my vet. That your vet welcomes you to bring anything unusual. If your cat's have an abrupt change in behavior, I cannot stress how important it is to have your vet take a look. This is a cat that used to be super vocal and following you around the house, is suddenly quiet and staying put when you walk through the room. That means something to me. Or cats that are suddenly peeing outside the litter box. That means something to me. And I wanna stress that there's often a medical explanation for that, which is why Decoding Your Cat is so special, because each of our chapters addresses different behavioral issues, different health issues, and what are those early signs of medical illness, and what some of these behaviors that you're seeing that are commonly attributed to something behavioral are actually indicative of a medical illness. So I really appreciate this. I know we didn't get to all the questions, but again, pick up a copy of the book, talk to your veterinarian, and hopefully you and your cat are going to have the best, longest, wonderful, most well lives together.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. It was